The morning was bright and sunny, but my world felt dark and cold. I walked into the kitchen and my breath caught in my throat. A shattered plate lay on the floor, its pieces scattered like broken promises. Spilled food and splintered wood created a path of chaos leading to the corner. My legs felt like lead and a chilling dread crept up my spine. My gaze fell on a small, still body. It was Alex, my little green parrot. I couldn't breathe. Hot tears streamed down my face, and the world narrowed down to this one horrific image. My heart screamed in silence. And there, standing over Alex, was Phoenix. His eyes, the same ones that had once pleaded for help, now held no remorse, no fear. Only the empty, wild gaze of a predator. It was at that moment I understood that my kindness had led to this catastrophe. But to understand why, I have to tell you the story from the beginning. It all started 2 months earlier. My life was simple and predictable. I'm Emily, I'm 27 years old, and I work for a small company that focuses on environmental sustainability. I live in a quiet house on the edge of town, and my days are structured and calm. Every morning, without fail, I go for a run. My usual path takes me through a large park and then veers off into a peculiar, forgotten place. It's an old industrial site, a massive factory that was abandoned years ago. Weeds and wildflowers have pushed their way through the cracked asphalt, and young trees have started to grow out of what used to be a concrete lot. I love that place. It feels like a secret garden where nature is slowly but surely reclaiming what was taken from it. One hot summer morning, the sun was already high in the sky and the air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. I was about 2 miles into my run, sweat dripping down my back, when I heard it. A faint, whiny sound, like a puppy in distress. I stopped. The sound was weak, almost swallowed by the breeze rustling through the leaves, but it was there. My heart, still racing from the run, now beat with a different rhythm, one of curiosity and concern. I followed the sound, my pace slowing to a walk as I moved off the path and deeper into the overgrown part of the old factory grounds. The whimpering led me to a large, rectangular concrete pit. It looked like an old water reservoir or a foundation for a long-gone structure. The pit was about 15 feet deep, its walls smooth and stained with algae. I carefully peered over the edge, and my blood ran cold. At the bottom of the pit, huddled in a small patch of mud and water, was a fox. It was thin, so thin I could see its ribs. Its fur was matted and caked with mud, and one of its back legs was bent at an unnatural angle. But what stopped me dead in my tracks were its eyes. They weren't the fierce, cunning eyes of a wild animal. They were wide with terror, filled with a desperate, silent plea. They looked right into mine, and it was as if a voice inside my head was screaming a single word: help. A wave of panic washed over me. I knew the risks. A wild animal, trapped and scared, could be dangerous. Rabies, bites. I was alone out here, with no phone, and the closest person was probably miles away. A rational part of my brain told me to leave, to find someone to call for help, but I couldn't. I just couldn't turn away from those eyes. They were begging me, and something in my soul felt a deep, undeniable connection to this suffering creature. It wasn't about being a hero, it was about a basic, human need to help another living being in pain. I looked around frantically for something, anything I could use. My eyes landed on a tattered, heavy tarp tangled in a pile of rusted metal rebar. It was dirty and smelled of oil, but it was strong. I carefully untangled it, my hands shaking with a mix of fear and adrenaline. I held one end of the tarp, letting the rest fall into the pit. The fox flinched at the sound, its weak body trembling, but it didn't try to bite or run. I knelt down at the edge of the pit, my voice soft and soothing. "I'm here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to get you out of here." I slowly slid down the wall of the pit, using the tarp to lower myself. The fox watched me, its eyes never leaving my face. When my feet hit the muddy bottom, a wave of cold water washed over my sneakers. The fox was maybe 10 feet away. I moved slowly, one cautious step after another. It didn't growl. It just whimpered again, a low, guttural sound of pure misery. I got closer, and its scent hit me, a mix of wet fur, dirt, and something metallic, like blood. I could see the cut on its head and the deep gash on its leg. I gently extended a hand. The fox didn't flinch. It was too exhausted, too broken to resist. I carefully wrapped the tarp around its body, creating a sling. As I did, its claws scraped against my bare forearms, not with malicious intent, but with the frantic, unthinking motion of a panicked animal. The scratches stung, but I ignored the pain. I held the ends of the tarp, and with all my strength, I started to climb back up the wall. It was a struggle. The walls were slippery, my arms were burning, and the weight of the fox felt heavier with every inch I climbed. I grunted, my muscles screaming in protest. My hands, slick with sweat and mud, kept slipping, but I held on. I thought of those eyes, and I pushed through the pain. Finally, with a last, desperate heave, I pulled myself and the fox over the edge. We both collapsed on the grass, panting heavily. My chest heaved, my arms ached, and my heart pounded against my ribs. The fox lay still, its body trembling uncontrollably. I carefully unwrapped the tarp, and its eyes met mine again. This time, I saw something different. Not just terror, but a flicker of what looked like understanding. I didn't waste any time. I knew it needed a vet, and it needed one fast. I gently picked up the fox, wrapping it completely in the tarp to keep it from struggling. It didn't fight me. It just lay there, a heavy, shivering ball of fur. I carried it back to my car, its weight surprisingly light due to its emaciated state. The drive to the vet's office was a blur of adrenaline and worry. I kept glancing back, half expecting it to wake up and start panicking, but it just lay there, its shallow breaths the only sign of life. I pulled into the vet clinic, a small building with a cheerful blue door, and carried the fox inside. The receptionist, a woman named Sharon, gave me a look of pure shock. "Emily, what in the world is that?" she asked, her eyes wide. "It's a fox," I said, my voice still shaky. "I found him in a pit. He's badly hurt." Sharon disappeared into the back and came out a moment later with Dr. Lewis, a tall, kind man with a weathered face and gentle hands. He was surprised, but his expression quickly turned serious as he saw the fox's state. "Bring him back here, Emily," he said, leading me to an examination room. As he carefully unwrapped the tarp and started to examine the fox, he looked at me with a questioning gaze. "You know this is a wild animal, right?" he asked, his voice calm. "Its instincts are not like a domesticated dog. It's a predator." "I know," I said, my voice cracking slightly. But he was hurt. He was begging for help. I couldn't just leave him there. Dr. Lewis sighed, but a small smile touched his lips. "He's lucky you found him. It's a broken leg and a few deep cuts. Nothing a few stitches and some time won't fix. But you can't keep him, Emily. This isn't a pet." "I know," I said again, my voice stronger now. "But I can't just release him now. He's too weak. Can I take him home, just until he's strong enough to survive on his own?" Dr. Lewis hesitated. He gave me a long, searching look, as if trying to read my soul. Then he nodded. "All right, but on one condition. You keep a very close eye on him. And once he's healed, he goes back into the wild. No exceptions. This is his home, not yours." I promised I would. Dr. Lewis gave him a shot for pain and one for infection, and carefully splinted his broken leg. The fox, still surprisingly docile, just watched him with weary eyes. As I was about to leave, I looked at the little creature. He needed a name, something that reflected what he had been through. "I'll call him Phoenix," I said, "because he rose from the ashes." Dr. Lewis just smiled and shook his head. I drove Phoenix home, this time with a mixture of hope and a little fear. He lay on a thick blanket on the passenger seat, his head resting on his paws. I had never had a wild animal in my house before. My other pets, my pug Quincy and my parrot Alex, would be a challenge. But I was determined to make this work. I set up a small space in the laundry room for Phoenix, a crate filled with blankets, away from Quincy and Alex to avoid any potential conflict. The first few days were a blur. Phoenix was terrified and barely moved. He refused to eat the food I put out for him, a mix of cooked chicken and vegetables. I had to coax him, sitting on the floor with him for hours, talking to him in a soft voice. On the third day, he finally ate. It was a moment of pure triumph for me. I felt like I had reached him. He started to look better. His fur, once matted and dirty, started to look a little cleaner. The splint on his leg was doing its job, and he was able to move around a little more easily. A week passed. The transformation was remarkable. Phoenix was no longer the broken, pathetic creature I had found in the pit. His leg was healing nicely, and he was gaining weight. He still had a limp, but he was getting stronger. I started to notice a change in his eyes. The desperation was gone, replaced by a keen, intelligent alertness. He watched me, not with the trusting gaze of a pet, but with the calculated observation of a wild animal. My dog Quincy, a loyal and sweet-natured pug, was the first to notice the change. At first, Quincy was curious about the new animal in the house. He would stand at the door of the laundry room, wagging his tail and sniffing. But as Phoenix grew stronger, Quincy's curiosity turned into fear. He would whimper and hide behind me whenever he heard a noise from the laundry room. My sweet Quincy was terrified of Phoenix, and I couldn't understand why. He wasn't aggressive, not outwardly anyway. He just seemed different. I started to let Phoenix out of the laundry room for short periods of time, always under my supervision. At first, he was cautious. He explored the house, his nose twitching, his body low to the ground. But his behavior started to change. He would scratch at the furniture, his sharp claws leaving deep gouges in the wood. He would try to bolt out the door whenever it opened. I dismissed it. He's a wild animal, I told myself. He's just acting on his instincts. I tried to see the old, broken fox in his eyes, but it was gone, replaced by something cold and primal. The turning point was one evening, about 10 days after the rescue. I was sitting on the couch, reading, and Phoenix was in the living room, supposedly resting. Suddenly, he let out a low, guttural growl. I looked up to see him staring intently at Alex's cage, his tail twitching back and forth. Alex, my beautiful parrot, had been a part of my life for 5 years. He was a sweet, noisy bird who loved to sing and mimic my voice. He was safe in his cage, or so I thought. I called to Phoenix, and he ignored me. I had to get up and physically pull him away from the cage, his growls getting louder and more menacing. It was the first time I felt a genuine shiver of fear in my own home. Dr. Lewis's words echoed in my head. He's a predator. His instincts are not like a domesticated dog. I tried to tell myself it was just a warning, that he was just curious. But I knew in my heart that it was more than that. I put Phoenix back in the laundry room and spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, my mind racing with worry. I had a hard time sleeping that night. My mind was in a turmoil. I tried to justify his behavior, to find excuses, but it was a losing battle. The truth was staring me in the face, but I was too blind to see it. I was so emotionally invested in this little animal, so proud of myself for saving it, that I had refused to acknowledge the reality of the situation. I had created a dangerous environment for myself and for my other pets. The next morning, I was woken up by a crash. A loud, sharp noise that made me bolt upright in bed. My heart hammered against my ribs. It sounded like it came from the kitchen. I ran down the stairs, my feet barely touching the ground. My worst fears were confirmed. The kitchen was a scene of destruction. A plate I had left on the counter was in a dozen pieces on the floor. My recycling bag was torn apart, a mountain of paper and plastic scattered everywhere. And there, standing over the body of my beloved Alex, was Phoenix. He was looking at me, and in his eyes, there was nothing. No joy, no remorse. Just the cold, detached look of a wild animal that had acted on its instincts. My mind reeled. I wanted to scream, to cry, to yell at him. But all that came out was a choking sob. I knelt next to Alex's lifeless body, my hands trembling as I reached out to touch him. The warmth was gone. My sweet, beautiful Alex was gone, killed by the very creature I had saved. I felt a betrayal so deep it was physical. I had risked my own safety, put my time and energy into saving this animal, and it had repaid me by killing my other pet. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. I called Dr. Lewis, my voice thick with tears. I tried to tell him what happened, but I could barely get the words out. He listened patiently, and when I was done, he just sighed. "Emily," he said, his voice soft and full of empathy. "I'm so sorry, but I warned you. This is what wild animals do. They are not like us. They don't operate on gratitude or emotion. They operate on instinct. He was a predator, and your parrot was his prey. It's a sad lesson, but it's an important one." The next few days were a blur of grief and guilt. I couldn't bring myself to look at Phoenix. I had moved him to the garage, where he was safe, but I couldn't be near him. Every time I saw him, I saw Alex's lifeless body. I knew what I had to do. The decision was painful, but it was the only one I could make. Phoenix had to go back to the wild. He couldn't stay with me. He couldn't be a pet. I called Dr. Lewis again, and he helped me. He told me about a large nature preserve a few hours from the city. A place where Phoenix could live free, without the threat of humans or the conflict of living in a domestic environment. I put Phoenix in a large kennel in the back of my car and drove him there myself. The drive was silent. The fox just sat there, his eyes fixed on the world outside. When we arrived, Dr. Lewis and a park ranger were waiting for us. We walked to a remote area of the preserve, surrounded by thick woods and a flowing river. I opened the kennel door. Phoenix hesitated for a moment. Then he walked out, his limp barely noticeable now. He looked at me for a split second, his eyes distant and unreadable, then turned and disappeared into the trees. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. I didn't get to say goodbye. There was no bond to sever. There was just an ending. A month later, my life had returned to a semblance of normal. I was still grieving for Alex, and my heart ached whenever I saw his empty cage. I still ran every morning, but I avoided the old industrial park. The memories were too painful. One evening, on a different trail, I saw a flash of red fur in the distance. A healthy-looking fox, its tail bushy, its coat thick and shiny, was standing on a large rock, its profile silhouetted against the setting sun. My heart gave a little lurch. It looked like Phoenix. The same lean frame, the same intense gaze. For a moment, I considered calling out to him, but then I stopped myself. The fox looked at me. Our eyes met across the distance, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of recognition. But then he just turned and trotted away, disappearing into the dense foliage. He was free. He was home, and I had learned my painful lesson. Kindness is a beautiful thing, but it has its limits. It can heal a broken body, but it can't change the wild heart of a predator. I don't regret saving him, but the experience taught me a truth I will never forget. It was an act of pure compassion that ended in a tragic heartbreak, but it was a truth I needed to learn. Some things are better left to nature.